My earliest memories are always filled with the sound of laughter and warmth. Growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, life wasn't always easy, but we made it work. My father was a mechanic, and my mother worked part-time at a local bakery. I had a simple, happy childhood, filled with family dinners and weekend trips to the park. Everything changed when I met Ethan. He was charming, ambitious, and full of dreams. We married young, with the whole town cheering us on. Life seemed perfect at first. Ethan had big plans, starting his own business, building a life better than the one we grew up with. I worked 2 jobs to help support his dreams, while he poured everything into his startup. I remember the first few months were exciting. We were both full of hope, talking late into the night about our future, about the places we'd visit once the business took off. We would laugh about how someday we'd look back at our humble beginnings and feel proud. I held on to those moments because they reminded me why I fell in love with him in the first place. But reality set in fast. Bills piled up, and Ethan's company wasn't taking off as planned. He became restless, constantly pacing around the apartment, making endless phone calls, his voice tight with anxiety. One night, he finally broke down and confessed he needed $300,000 to save the business. I didn't hesitate. I promised him I'd find a way. Taking out that loan was terrifying. I sat in the bank, signing papers with shaking hands, convincing myself that this was just part of our story. Ethan kissed me on the forehead and thanked me repeatedly, swearing that everything would be okay. I wanted to believe him. Love makes you believe, even when the evidence tells you otherwise. As the months dragged on, I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, covering the mortgage and groceries while Ethan spent more and more time at his office. He grew distant. Nights stretched into mornings without him coming home, and when he did, he was irritable and silent. I asked him how the business was going, but he would just mumble something vague and avoid my eyes. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells. I didn't want to push him, but I was drowning too. The weight of the debt pressed on me every waking moment. I kept hoping for a breakthrough, some miracle that would make it all worth it. I found myself scrolling through old pictures from happier times, wondering how we ended up here. One evening, after working a double shift, I came home to find Ethan sprawled on the couch, his eyes glazed over. Empty beer cans littered the coffee table. I tried to talk to him, but he just grunted in response. I sat next to him, trying to find the right words to break through the wall he'd built around himself. Finally, I whispered, "Ethan, we need to talk. About us. About the debt." He didn't answer, just turned up the volume on the TV. I stared at him, feeling my heart sink. This wasn't the man I married, the one who looked at me like I was his whole world. I didn't know this stranger who had taken his place. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time we had a real conversation. I felt trapped in a life I didn't recognize anymore, tied to a man who no longer seemed to care about me, or us. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. I couldn't, not after everything I had sacrificed. In the days that followed, I did my best to support him. I cooked his favorite meals, left little notes around the house, reminding him I was still there. I even suggested we take a weekend off, just the 2 of us. He nodded absently, but the trip never happened. It wasn't until I found the bank statements buried in a drawer that I realized how much deeper we were in debt. Ethan had taken out additional loans, maxed out credit cards, and the numbers were staggering. I confronted him that night, my hands shaking as I held the papers. He didn't deny it, just sat there, staring at the floor. I couldn't believe it. I had trusted him, put everything on the line, and he had just kept digging the hole deeper. I wanted to scream, to cry, but I felt numb. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "I didn't want to disappoint you," he mumbled. His voice was so small, like he was a kid who had broken a toy. I wanted to hold on to that small bit of vulnerability, but it wasn't enough. Not this time. I had spent months trying to fix everything, sacrificing my own dreams to keep his alive. I couldn't keep carrying the weight alone. That night, for the first time, I let myself imagine a life without Ethan. A life where I wasn't constantly putting myself second, where I didn't wake up every morning with a knot in my stomach. It scared me, but it also gave me a strange sense of relief. Maybe I could survive on my own. Maybe I could find happiness again. It started with a phone call in the middle of the night. My phone buzzed, lighting up the dark room, and I squinted at the screen. It was Ethan. He never called this late anymore. My heart raced, worried that something terrible had happened. I picked up, and before I could say anything, I heard his voice, soft, almost whispering, like he didn't want anyone to hear. "I'm at Claire's," he said. "I'm not coming home tonight." I froze, my mind racing. Claire? Who was Claire? My heart pounded in my chest, and I struggled to find words. "Ethan, who is Claire?" I finally managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated, and I could hear muffled sounds in the background. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. "Just a friend," he said vaguely. I'll be back tomorrow." He hung up before I could press for more answers. I sat there in the dark, gripping my phone, feeling like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. I didn't sleep at all that night, my mind replaying his words over and over. The next morning, Ethan didn't come home. I called him several times, but he didn't answer. My stomach was in knots. I couldn't focus on anything. Not work, not eating, not even breathing without feeling that tightness in my chest. Hours later, he finally came back. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched breakfast I had made hours earlier. He looked disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and his eyes bloodshot. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I told you, at Claire's. We were just talking." "Talking?" I repeated, disbelief clear in my tone. "All night?" He didn't respond. Instead, he walked past me, heading for the bedroom. I followed, desperate for answers. "Ethan, look at me. Who is she? Why didn't you come home?" He stopped and turned around, his face unreadable. "I don't owe you an explanation," he muttered. The hurt flashed through me like a knife. "You don't owe me." "Ethan, I've been here, supporting you, working double shifts to keep us afloat. And you think you don't owe me an explanation?" He scoffed. "You're always playing the martyr. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with money and work, we wouldn't be like this." I stared at him, shocked. "I'm doing this for us, to keep us from drowning in debt." He just shook his head, brushing past me to the bathroom. I couldn't hold back anymore. The tears came hot and fast, and I crumpled onto the bed, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. For the next few weeks, things between us were tense. Ethan stayed out more often, coming home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. I couldn't bring myself to confront him. I didn't want to hear the truth. One night, after another late return, I finally gathered the courage. I blocked the doorway before he could retreat to the bedroom. "Ethan, are you cheating on me?" His eyes widened briefly before his face hardened. "Why does it matter? You're not the same anymore. You're always stressed, always tired. I needed..." I needed someone who actually cared. His words hit me like a slap. I couldn't breathe. I cared. I still care. But you're the one who shut me out. You're the one who lied. He just shrugged. You're right, I did lie. I've been seeing Claire for months. She actually listens. She doesn't nag me about money all the time. I stumbled back, my mind spinning. Months? While I was breaking my back to keep our lives from falling apart, he was with her. I wanted to scream, to hit something, but I just stood there, frozen. That night, Ethan slept on the couch. I couldn't sleep at all. I kept replaying every moment, wondering how I didn't see it, how I convinced myself that his late nights were just him working harder. The next morning, Ethan casually mentioned that he needed some space, that maybe we needed a break. I felt numb, unable to process his indifference. I agreed, too tired to argue. For the next few days, he barely came home. One afternoon, as I sorted through the mail, I found a letter from the bank. Final notice. The loan was due. I had poured every cent I had into paying it off, and we were still behind. I couldn't breathe, the walls closing in around me. I confronted Ethan when he finally showed up, but he just shrugged. That's your problem. You took out the loan. That was it. I couldn't take any more. I packed my bags, tears streaming down my face, and when I reached the door, I turned to him. Did you forget something? He looked up from his phone, annoyed. What now? I paid off your debt. I stood by you. I gave up everything for you. And you threw it all away. He didn't even respond, just looked back at his phone. I walked out, feeling both broken and strangely free. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I deserved better. I deserved someone who would fight for me the way I had fought for him. And I wasn't going to settle for anything less ever again. I wandered through the city streets, my suitcase dragging behind me, unsure of where to go. The chill of the night air bit into my skin, but I couldn't feel it. My thoughts swirled like a storm, replaying Ethan's betrayal over and over. I had given him everything, my time, my love, my money, and he had tossed me aside like I was nothing. I finally found myself at a small, nondescript motel on the edge of town. The old man behind the counter barely looked up as I checked in, my voice barely above a whisper. The room was as bleak as I felt. Faded wallpaper, a bed with a lumpy mattress, and a single window looking out onto the parking lot. I didn't care. I dropped my suitcase and collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow as sobs racked my body. When I finally stopped crying, I felt hollow, like I'd given away every piece of myself, and now there was nothing left. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I had ended up here. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but I didn't know who to turn to. I had isolated myself for so long, focused on Ethan and his problems, that I had lost my friends. My family had always warned me about him, and I was too proud to admit they had been right. As dawn crept through the window, I forced myself to get up and take a shower. The icy water jolted me awake, and for the first time in days, I felt a small spark of clarity. I needed to get my life back. Ethan had taken so much from me, but I still had something left, myself. I made a list in my head, things I needed to do. Find a job, a place to stay, and figure out how to rebuild. I couldn't go back to Ethan, and I refused to wallow in this pit of despair. I glanced at my phone, still half hoping he might call or text, apologize, and beg me to come back. But there was nothing. Just silence. I spent the next few days walking around the city, handing out resumes wherever I could. I avoided looking at the notifications on my phone, afraid of what I might see. or not see. One evening, as I was wandering through a quiet park, my phone rang. I hesitated, but when I saw the number, my heart nearly stopped. It was Ethan. Against my better judgment, I answered. He sounded bored, almost irritated. "Where are you?" he asked, as if I had just stepped out to the store. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "Why do you care?" He scoffed. "You left without even trying to fix things. You're being dramatic." Something inside me snapped. I couldn't believe the audacity. "Dramatic? I paid off your debt, Ethan. I supported you when you had nothing. I worked myself to exhaustion while you lied to me and cheated behind my back. And you think I'm being dramatic?" He sighed, sounding annoyed. "Look, it's not that big of a deal. Claire just understands me better." I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. "You know what? I'm done. You don't get to manipulate me anymore. Enjoy your life with Claire. I hope she's everything you think you deserve." I hung up before he could respond, and for the first time since I left, I felt a glimmer of strength. I had finally said it, finally stood up for myself. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to move on. In the weeks that followed, I found a job at a small bakery. The owner, a kind woman named Martha, didn't ask too many questions, just gave me a chance to prove myself. I worked long hours, and the routine helped me find a sense of normalcy. Slowly, I started to reconnect with the world, reaching out to old friends, apologizing for disappearing, and explaining what had happened. One evening, as I was closing up the shop, a familiar figure appeared at the door. My sister, Anna. I hadn't spoken to her in years, too ashamed of how my life had turned out. She walked in, gave me a long, searching look, and pulled me into a hug without saying a word. We sat down over coffee, and I finally let it all out. How Ethan had used me, how I had given up everything for him. Anna listened, her face a mix of sympathy and anger. "You didn't deserve that," she said firmly. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you." Her words were like a balm to my wounded soul. I realized then that I didn't have to go through this alone. I had family who still cared, friends who still wanted me in their lives. I had been so wrapped up in saving Ethan that I had forgotten to save myself. When I went to bed that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe it wouldn't be easy, and maybe I'd have to rebuild from the ground up. But I wasn't defeated. I was still here, still fighting. And that was enough to keep going. I wasn't the same person who had walked out of that house with a suitcase and a broken heart. I was stronger now. And I was ready to start over. Working at the bakery became my sanctuary. Martha never pried into my past, and I was grateful for that. She just offered me endless cups of coffee and a warm, welcoming presence. I needed that comfort while I pieced my life back together, one muffin and cinnamon roll at a time. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the shop's window and barely recognize myself. The girl who once poured her soul into saving someone else had changed. I was learning to live for myself, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. One afternoon, as I was kneading dough, Martha came into the back room looking uneasy. "There's a man out front asking for you," she said gently. My heart sank. I knew who it was even before I walked out to the counter. Ethan stood there, looking far too composed, like he hadn't shattered my world. I swallowed the rising bitterness and walked up to him, forcing myself to stay calm. He gave me a once-over, a faint smirk crossing his face. "This is where you ended up? Working in some run-down bakery?" I didn't take the bait. "Why are you here, Ethan?" He leaned against the counter, acting like he owned the place. "You blocked my number. Didn't think you'd just disappear like that. You owe me an explanation." I almost laughed. "An explanation? You kicked me out after I paid off your debt. You cheated on me. I owe you nothing. His face hardened. You're being irrational. Claire and I... It's complicated. I was going to talk to you about it, but you overreacted. I couldn't believe his audacity. Overreacted? You threw me out like I was trash. You didn't even look back. He straightened, looking suddenly defensive. You're making it sound worse than it was. I thought you'd at least be mature about this. Mature. The word stung like a slap. I realized then that he still saw me as the girl who would bend over backward to please him, but I wasn't that person anymore. I took a deep breath. You need to leave. I'm not doing this with you. He scoffed. So that's it. You're just gonna hide out here and pretend you didn't throw our relationship away? Anger flared up inside me. I didn't throw it away. You did. You betrayed me. You took advantage of me, and I'm done being your backup plan. For the first time, his confidence wavered. I didn't think you'd actually leave, he muttered. Well, I did. Now go. He hesitated, as if realizing I wasn't going to cave. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. I felt like I could finally breathe again. Martha approached cautiously. You okay? I managed a shaky smile. Yeah, I think I am. That night, Anna called to check in. I told her everything, and she listened without judgment. You're stronger than you know, she said. Hanging up, I thought about those words. I had faced Ethan, not just physically but emotionally. I had put myself first. Maybe it didn't erase the hurt, but it proved that I could stand on my own. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated but picked up. A woman's voice, unfamiliar but calm, greeted me. Hi, is this Jenna? My name's Claire. My stomach dropped. What do you want? She hesitated. I wanted to apologize. I didn't know what Ethan was really like. He told me you left him for someone else. I found out the truth when I saw your social media post. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her it wasn't my problem. Another part of me knew that I wasn't the only one who'd been deceived. I'm sorry, she continued, for everything. He's not who I thought he was. I let out a long breath. You're not the first person he's lied to. Just be careful. After I hung up, I felt strangely lighter. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was another step forward. I wasn't trapped in that cycle of anger and regret. I was moving on, little by little, and that was enough for now. I didn't know when it happened exactly. The moment when my mind shifted from just surviving to seeking something more. But it was there, growing in the pit of my stomach like a hunger I couldn't ignore. Every day, I moved closer to it, closer to the plan. I was no longer the woman who had walked away from Ethan all those months ago. I was stronger, sharper, colder, and I knew exactly what I wanted. Ethan had cost me everything, but I was going to take it all back. Every ounce of dignity, every scrap of self-worth I had sacrificed for him, I was going to reclaim. And then, when I had everything in my hands, I would show him just how badly he had miscalculated. It wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't about punishing him, though that was part of it. No, this was about me. This was about proving to myself that I wasn't weak, that I didn't need anyone's validation to be whole. And if I happened to ruin him along the way, so be it. I kept my focus on the bakery, throwing myself into work as I had always done. I still felt the heavy weight of what Ethan had done to me. But now it was a motivator. Every time I mixed dough, every time I made a perfect batch of pastries, it was one step closer to the final act. But my life was changing in ways I hadn't expected. With the money I had saved from the bakery, I began making investments, small, calculated moves. At first, it was just a little money in stocks, a new property. Then, as my confidence grew, I expanded. I bought and sold, flipped properties, took risks I hadn't considered before. There was a fire in me now, a sense of purpose. I wasn't just playing catch-up anymore. I was ahead of the game. Anna helped me. She always had a sharp mind for business, and slowly but surely, I was building an empire. I felt the rush of control, of power. I had once been Ethan's puppet, but now I was the one pulling the strings. But the plan had to be perfect, and I needed information. Ethan had always been careful, too careful. But nothing lasts forever. People have weaknesses, and if you know where to look, you can exploit them. I kept tabs on Ethan, not out of desperation, but out of calculation. I knew he was struggling, hiding behind Claire, pretending everything was fine. His company, once thriving, was starting to show cracks. I couldn't help but smile every time I heard a rumor about him. He didn't know it yet, but his downfall was coming. It wasn't long before I realized I had the leverage I needed. It was a slow burn, building up over time. His debts were mounting again, hidden behind layers of paperwork and deceit. He was borrowing money from people he shouldn't have. And I, with my newfound wealth, had more than enough to manipulate the situation. I arranged a meeting, carefully, subtly. I wanted him to see that I wasn't the same vulnerable woman he had discarded. I wasn't desperate for him anymore. I wasn't angry either, though the rage inside me had simmered long enough. I simply wanted him to understand that I was in control now. When I walked into the sleek glass and steel office where we had first met all those years ago, I felt a wave of cold satisfaction wash over me. Ethan looked up, his eyes narrowing when he saw me. "Emily," he said, his voice dripping with false politeness. "What are you doing here?" I could see the familiar look of disdain, the same one that had always been there, but now it didn't bother me. It was almost laughable, how little he understood about the changes I had undergone. "You look good, Ethan," I said, my voice smooth. "But I've been better." He frowned, clearly taken aback. "What do you want?" I leaned forward, hands folded in front of me on the desk. I knew this moment was crucial. If I showed even a hint of weakness, it would all unravel. But I felt no fear, no hesitation. "I want you to understand something," I said, my tone calm. "You took everything from me, Ethan. My trust, my money, my future. But I got it all back. I'm not the broken woman you used to know. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice." I paused for a moment, watching the realization spread across his face. The shock, the confusion. He hadn't expected this. He had probably thought I would beg for him to take me back or apologize for all the things he had done. But no, I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. "I know about your debts," I said, watching his expression flicker. "You're in deep, and I have the means to help you, for a price. But this time, you're not the one calling the shots." I could see the panic creeping into his eyes. He knew, deep down, that he was cornered. That he couldn't fix things the way he had always done, lying, cheating, using people. "You think you can intimidate me, Emily?" He spat, trying to regain some semblance of control. "You're nothing. You always have been." His words didn't sting. They didn't affect me at all. Instead, they solidified my resolve. He was still that same man. Arrogant, self-centered, blind to everything except his own desires. "No," I said, standing up. "I'm not intimidating you, Ethan. I'm reminding you that I'm in control now. And this time, when I walk away, it's because I choose to. I turned and walked out of the office, feeling the weight of that moment settle on my shoulders. The next few months were a whirlwind. Ethan tried to fight, tried to push back, but the truth was, he was too far gone. His business crumbled under the pressure of the loans I had strategically forced him into. Claire left him when she realized he had no future left to offer. His reputation, once golden, was now tarnished beyond repair. As for me, I was free. I had reclaimed everything I had lost, and then some. The empire I had built was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. But it wasn't the money, or the success, or the power that mattered most to me. No, what mattered was that I had finally taken back my life. I had faced the woman I used to be and let her go. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had been tested, broken, and rebuilt. I had survived Ethan's betrayal, and I had risen from the ashes. I had won.